Isaiah 40, coming back there, the end result of this is this: the valleys, the poor, the broken, the abused, those with special needs are lifted up by the strong, humbling themselves and serving. And the end result is the glory of the Lord is revealed. Not just for a few, but for all. I believe that the fulfillment of Isaiah 40 began with Jesus. Though I believe, of course, Jesus is also a continuation of what God's Spirit was always doing. But it's continuing. And there's stuff, I don't know, you probably get spared some of the crazy wacko stuff that goes on in America. But, this predicting of dates and stuff that happened recently. When exactly will all mankind see the glory? I don't know. Is there a huge worldwide revival coming that will make that happen? I don't know. There are things that we know from the scriptures and from his heart, and there are things that will remain mystery. I don't mean crime, I mean something unfathomable. But at its heart, worship and mission cannot be about just thinking right, though I have a huge value for theology and a huge value for good biblical teaching. But the presence of the mentally handicapped among us, just one of them, shows us that salvation cannot be about thinking rightly. The presence of one mentally handicapped person in your life who you see and experience the love of God through shows you it cannot, at its core, be about thinking rightly. Unless you want to damn my sons and every other mentally handicapped person to eternal separation from God. I love thinking things through. I go for a walk every Thursday morning with my dad, and we talk philosophy, theology. My dad is a retired educator. I dreamt of having sons with whom I could do the same. And God gave me my 2 sons who give me a hug every morning, every other morning. And that was God's provision for me. Somehow God's road for me is that road of valuing thought and truth and thinking things through. And I labor through probably 10 to 15 drafts of each song. I bounce them off theologians and pastors because I don't want to sing things that are not true. It's amazing to me, we tell our songwriters, just go write us a song. Just go write us a little ditty we can sing in church. And we tell our pastors, go study for years. Learn sermons that people will promptly forget. But to the songwriters, oh yeah, just write us a little ditty. And then it's the songs that reveal our theology. And that's what people remember. So us songwriters need to be theologically schooled. I don't mean necessarily that we have to graduate from a theological college. I mean we need to be students our whole life. I have several theological books on the go nonstop because I don't have time to go for 4 years to theological school. But thank goodness for the printing press, for all the different, and I just keep on studying. But so that's important. I value it. I spend my own money. I just flew to Colorado on my own expense, several $1,000s to attend a private theological development week with, Miroslav Volf and theologians, and I just loved it. But on the other hand, if my life is immersed just in thinking rightly and not in acts of compassion and love, then my songs become like a noise, or our theological sermons just dribble off the edge of the stage. We need both. And worship and mission can't just be about our moral rightness if we want to be about the same mission that Jesus was on. Every time God forgives one of us, he demonstrates that he would rather have relationship with us than be alienated from us. Even though what we did was wrong and God's law is right. God's own rules do not matter as much to him as having relationship with us. And that freaked the religious leaders out. And I may tell you something. The man who is suing us right now, it freaks him out. Because my wife and I took in a woman who had a child out of wedlock. And she was helping with our handicapped sons and helping. And my co-pastor and friend wanted us to basically take this woman, who then ended up for a season moving in with the father of the child. And his solution was, kick her out. Don't let her have any access to your children. And my wife and I thought about it. We thought, this woman comes from a background with no faith. She comes from a kind of like a verbally abusive home. It's a horrific life. We believe that we're supposed to be a living demonstration of compassion. So we included her. We constantly invited her over. We would invite her live-in boyfriend. Come on, and he came once expecting us to basically stand there and be nasty to him. And we just laughed with him. We fed them. And this went on for a couple of years. And just a few months ago, I married them. And she is transformed and radiant. And this is just an amazing story. He's not in the faith yet, but he is becoming so warm and so open. He doesn't know where to put it because Joanna says to me, she says, he just kept on, like, privately he would say, oh, those Christians, they're like, da-da-da. He says, but he doesn't know what to think anymore because what he's experienced from you is the complete opposite. So, we're not going to achieve our mission through the moral high ground. I don't believe Jesus demonstrated that. We need to serve. We need to walk in humility. We need to lift them up. We need to be faithful with our families. And in all of that, we ask God's kingdom to come. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Do we get the nations through conquest or inheritance? Will we achieve what God longs to accomplish in worship and mission through our strength or through our surrender? The glory comes through jars of clay, cracked, fragile. But maybe people experience more of God's glory through our cracks than through our certitude. And if God blesses us with strength, if we do our part and we're faithful and we serve and we grow in skill and we do everything we can to be about the Father's business, and that leads to favor and wealth or whatever it is, our call as worshipers is to use that which God provides, to go to the valleys of our world, to the lowly and the broken, and lift them up. And I want to close my talking part before we finish with a few songs with a David story. That's one of my favorites in the whole Bible. And before I read the story, I want to just set it up this way. David's story in the scriptures begins this way. When Samuel arrives to anoint one of the sons of Jesse as king, his father doesn't even call him. In his own home, David is treated as the least. In fact, in his own home, he is the valley God wants to raise up. And all the people who see themselves as mountains parade and show up and queue up. There they are, the mountains, the first son, the second son. They're, can you just see it? You feel what they feel. Oh, my chance. I'm a mountain. I'm taller. I'm strong. Like just strutting. I mean, men like, whoa, yeah. To use the Angus phrase from last night, David is a classic nobody. I mean, it's hard for us to, because we're so ingrained in the David story and the Psalms and the greatest songwriter who ever lived and all of those things, but go back to the beginning. His own father didn't even call him by name. His father calls him the Hakaton in Hebrew, which means the baby brother. In fact, the first time his name appears in Scripture is right after Samuel anoints him. And it says, from that day on, the Spirit of the Lord came upon David in power. Now, one more question. That's just been me. I'm kind of an artistic, creative guy, and I'm always looking for the backstory. So, well, why, hang a second. Why is David so hidden? Why is he so lowly? Why is he ignored by his own father and his own brothers? Makes me wonder, and others have wondered, even though it sounds like a scandal, whether David's origins were not as a result of a union of love between Jesse and his wife. What if he was an unwanted pregnancy from an affair? We don't know that, but there's just things in the David story, because the seeds that are planted in our biological and emotional history have a way of repeating themselves and reaping harvests. And there's things about the David story that go, I wonder. Now, this is Isaiah 40 in action. We're gonna read 2 Samuel chapter 9. I love this story. So now we're into the full height of David's influence and power and doing what God wanted him to do, and he's a warrior and he's a worshiper and he's a leader and he's a shepherd of the flock of God. And I love this story. David asks, is there anyone left of the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake? Now, when the kings of old sought out a surviving relative of their nemesis, why would they seek them out? Off with their heads, right? That's why the kings of old did. And I'm pretty sure that these people that are summoned are shaking for fear of their life. Now, there was a servant of Saul's household named Ziba. They summoned him to appear before David, and the king said, "Are you Ziba?" "At your service," he replied. The king asked, "Is there no one still alive from the house of Saul?" Then he has to qualify it, "to whom I can show God's kindness." Of course, kings always do that. They lie, and then they still cut off their heads. Ziba answered the king, "There is still a son of Jonathan. He is lame in both feet." "Where is he?" the king asked. Ziba answered, "He is at the house of Machir, son of Amiel in Lo-debar." So King David had him brought from Lo-debar. Can you imagine what that journey would have felt like? Incredible. When Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David, he bowed down to pay him honor. David, I love this, "Mephibosheth, at your service," he replied. "Don't be afraid," David said, "for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul." And here's the kicker, the top. "And you will always eat at my table." Mephibosheth bowed down and said, "What is it, your servant, that you should notice a dead dog like me?" Do you understand? That's how the handicapped in our world feel. They've always felt that shame. The king summoned Ziba, Saul's steward, and said to him, "I have given your master's grandson everything that belonged to Saul and his family. You and your sons and your servants are to farm the land for him, because he was lame, he couldn't do it himself, and bring in the crops so that your master's grandson may be provided for. The inference is that wasn't happening until this moment. In other words, Ziba, whoever he was looking after himself, but he wasn't looking after the lame man who couldn't help himself, even though it was his charge. And Mephibosheth, grandson of your master, will always eat at my table. So Mephibosheth at the end there ate at David's table like this. Listen to this. Like one of the king's sons. God is into family. God is into family. Verse 13, and Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem because why? Because he always ate at the king's table. Oh, isn't this such this is just such a beautiful story. Because in that time, people who were handicapped mentally, physically, were considered cursed by God. And we still have places in the world today that when somebody has that kind of handicap, they're considered cursed by God. And even his name, Mephibosheth, means son of shame. And David, mighty man of God, a mountain of a man now in his power and his position, takes this lowly valley and he says, my table is your table. That's the most intimate thing. Other than the bedroom stuff, the most intimate thing he could do was to share his table. Breaking bread together, both seated at the table on level ground. A king and a cripple. David including and honoring somebody who could never earn it. This is what the kingdom of God is like. And it said, when it says he was like one of the sons, it's the permanence of it. It's that adoptive picture. It's that thing, we take the broken and the lowly who keep on expecting rejection. And I know from this woman that we've included and some other examples that we include and come regularly on our family night or other times, they so love it. They love it. But there's always that little part of them that just thinks, well, if I do something wrong, I guess you'll reject me. And that's not the way of our Father. He keeps that open door, keeps that open heart. David started out as an unnoticed nobody. He became king, and then he had to learn his place again through suffering. And then because of some of that suffering, became a vessel for the compassion of God for the suffering. And all of your pain and your suffering, God is using to give you compassion for others who suffer. And worship is that place where our own pride, what a theologian calls our infantile grandiosity, is defeated by the love and the greatness of God. And mission is where we serve a broken world with compassion. And all we have to give is what we've received ourselves. That's, I love again what Angus said last night. All we have to give is to share what Jesus has done for us. But let me make no mistake, sometimes Jesus, grace and love comes to us in disguise, and it's something that we wouldn't, choose in advance, but it's all God still. Habakkuk 2:14, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory. The glory fills everything, even our weakness. And the glory fills my son Isaiah, who, unlike the prophet of old, cannot speak, but who, in every hug that he gives me, he becomes the Word of God made flesh. He came, John 1:14, he came and made his dwelling among us. He set up his tent next to ours. The holy God, perfectly pure in everything, doesn't react to our sin, doesn't react to all of those things. He comes and he sets up his tent next to ours. Can I have the band come on back up? And that's what, so I just think when we think about worship and mission and the glory of God, that really, to me, there's something about this Isaiah 40 passage that just anchors us. We want to experience the presence and the glory of God. But that presence of God, that glory of God, is always meant to spill over and be a blessing to the world. And the world will not come and be convinced if we spend all of our energy arguing and trying to convince we are right. Most of the time in the world, we just need to silently and faithfully and lovingly serve those who no one else will, until they ask us, why? Why do you do that? Why are you so faithful in that? Why are you? And then in every profession, in every institution, in every school, and every university, skillfully and faithfully serving, loving God, loving the broken around us, looking for the valleys and raising them up. Just take a moment as we just close off with a couple of songs, just to ask the Father to fill you with his love, to come into your valleys. Come, love of God. Oh, how you love us.